sorry we're running a few minutes late, but thank you all for coming. I'm Twilight Greenaway. I'm the managing editor at Civil Eats, and we are here to speak about food waste. I'm going to cut my intro fairly short, since we are over time a bit. We're going to have a few different presentations, and then I'll ask a couple questions, and then I hope that you all have come with some hard questions for our four panelists. Food waste is one of the most popular topics for me as an editor when I'm thinking about what I'm putting together for the site. Food waste almost always attracts an audience. People are I would say genuinely really curious and really interested to read about the issue, and yet it's also an enormous set of tasks that we have ahead of ourselves. I'm looking at Nadia's giant icicle, and it's a great metaphor for the size of this problem. Food waste is also something that I think many of us agree on, at least on the surface. Many people in this food world, even people who may have different opinions about a number of other things, I think it's fairly easy to agree that we should be wasting less food. But I also think there are some things that we can disagree on and can discuss and kind of get into, and I'm curious to do that a little bit later on this panel. But first, I want to introduce our panelists. Oh wait, actually, first I want to tell you about some fruit that's down in the front. We have imperfect produce here, and I'm just going to hand this off to Alex really quick. She's going to tell you why this produce hasn't made it to the marketplace. And then you guys can come up and pick some up as you're leaving if you're wanting a snack at the end of the panel.
Great, thanks Twilight. I'm pretty pumped to be on a stage with a bunch of amazing women. That's really exciting. And I'm pumped to be holding this quote-unquote ugly produce. So what Imperfect does is we purchase directly from the farmer produce that has been rejected for some cosmetic reason. It's only skin deep. If you can see this apple, it's misshapen, so the grocery store wouldn't buy it. If you can see this mandarin, there's a scar on it, so the grocery store would buy it. So the farmer's not making any money. People that need access to good food are not getting it. And so what we do at Imperfect is we purchase this produce directly from the farmer. We package it up into a produce box, kind of like a CSA, and we ship it in the Bay Area every week or every other week. So we brought some to share with you guys today. Some of the folks on this panel work pretty closely with us too, so we're really pumped to be here to support them. And come check us out. Thanks.
Thanks, Alex. So, our panelists. Nadia Scialabba. Did I get that? No, not really. Tell us, how do we pronounce your name? Scialabba. She is the Senior Natural Resources Officer of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, otherwise known as the FAO. Nadia has been with the FAO since 1985, having held different positions in the Fisheries, Agriculture, and Environment departments. Now Senior Natural Resources Officer, she's entrusted to mainstream environment and sustainable development considerations into food and agriculture systems. Dana Gunders, to my right, a senior scientist on food and agriculture at the NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council. Dana leads the NRDC's work on reducing food waste with a focus on advancing market and policy initiatives to promote sustainability. She recently published her first book. We featured it on Civil Eats. It's called the Waste Free Kitchen Handbook, and it offers a consumer guide to reducing food waste from the grocery store to the kitchen. Dana Frasz is the founder and director of Food Shift. She's a visionary systems thinker with 13 years of food recovery, management, and entrepreneurship experience, including launching her own award-winning food recovery group at Sarah Lawrence College and spending 3 years at Ashoka. Acknowledging that the current food system is leaving both food and people falling through the cracks, she launched Food Shift in 2012. Mary Risley, founder of Food Runners, is a pioneering figure in the Bay Area food community. She started Tante Marie's Cooking School as a full-time professional school over 35 years ago. In 1987, she founded Food Runners, a grassroots organization picking up excess food from businesses and delivering it directly to agencies feeding the hungry in San Francisco. So we're going to start with Nadia, and she's going to give us the big picture of the cost of food waste on a global level.
Hello everybody. We're going to start with a short video, 3 minutes, on the hidden cost of food wastage. And after I will explain some of these numbers to you.
Food production is lost after harvest or wasted in shops, households and catering services. This represents $750 billion worth of food every year, and that is at producer prices. At retail prices, the value reaches $1 trillion, twice the GDP of Norway. If nature asked us to pay the total bill for food wastage, it could charge society at least another $700 billion a year, because that wasted food still caused greenhouse gas emissions and climate change damages, used water for irrigation and increased water scarcity, cleared forests and eroded land, led to loss of pollinators, fishes and other biodiversity. And there is more. Social costs worth another $1 trillion are caused by food that never added one bit of nutrition to humanity. This includes pesticides' impact on human health, loss of livelihoods as natural resources become more scarce, conflicts induced by pressure on natural resources, and subsidies spent to produce food wastage. But those are only the costs that can be calculated. Food wastage has many more costs that cannot be quantified. Imagine if we quantified the loss of wetlands that purify water, or of biodiversity of pastures, or the value of fish discarded, or the scarcity of essential agricultural inputs such as phosphorus, or the increase in food prices because of less supply. Assigning monetary value to environmental or social impacts will always be inexact. How to value beautiful landscape or a child's health? However we look at it, reducing food wastages makes sense economically, environmentally and socially. But not all the food wastage reduction measures are equal. Some are better than others for nature and society. Reducing food loss by raising consumer awareness or investing in improved post-harvest infrastructures and reducing food loss means we avoid using natural resources in the first place, leaving them available for the next harvest or future generations. Food that is about to be wasted on the market can best be redirected to charities. Or if it is not up to human consumption standards, then think of feeding it to livestock, so that there is less need to produce animal feed. When you save the food, you save the resources used to produce it. Food waste used to produce biogas is surely a better option than dumping it in landfills, but this wastage reduction measure is the least environmentally effective. All food reduction measures are different in terms of climate impact and use of water, land and biodiversity. Reducing wastage by not creating it in the first place should be a priority for all.
Okay, so just in looking, can you hear me well? Yes, now it's better. Just in looking at the graphs on how we came to these values, this 1/3 of food production which is wasted, we have it also divided by type of commodity, and you see that, for example, certain commodities like cereals or vegetables have lose much more resources. Now, when we talk about food wastage, it's really at the post-harvest loss, which is mainly in developing countries, and that's about the number 54%. And downstream, which is at consumer level, like in more richer countries, you have also the waste of 46%. So it's more or less half-half, I would say. So we have these different problems in different types of countries or groups. Then if you divide the same numbers by per capita, you will see that North America has the highest per capita food waste of 343 kilogram per person. Now, why did we start this? It's because FAO has been working at least 60 years on trying to assist developing countries in improving post-harvest losses for food security purposes, actually. And it's still much more economic to let the food, being lost than to do something about it. And this is why for Rio Plus 20 in 2011-2012, we thought that we should perhaps look at the impact on natural resources and try to look at it from different perspectives. And this is how the true cost work started in FAO. So when you look at the cost on, for example, greenhouse gases, and it's the numbers revised as of last year for COP21 is 4.4 gigatons per year. If it was to be a country, that would be like the third most emitting country after USA and China. And I think this one number was enough to kind of be a wake-up call for many constituencies that has started cooperating environment people with the agriculture people if we really want to reach the target of reducing greenhouse gases. And here you have the same kind of carbon footprint by commodity, and you see that animal products have the highest carbon footprint. And here you have it per capita, and the per capita carbon footprint, the biggest one is in Asia because you have much more production in terms of volume, but when you go back to per capita, it's again in North America. And here you have the blue water footprint. And again, it's the part of the economy which is using most water resources, much more than any other country in terms of irrigation for agriculture. And the number of the quantity of this water which is lost due to waste is like 3 times Lake Geneva, or I think even twice Lake Tahoe, for example. Just for you to relate on the amount of water which is lost every year. Then here we have by commodity again, that you see that for cereal you have a very high water use, and it's mainly because cereals use more water. But then in terms of quantity, also vegetables use a lot of water unduly. Here we have the land occupation, and again, 28% of global agricultural areas are used, just to produce food wastage, when we are always talking about, the need to have more land for agriculture. And by commodity, of course, meat and milk, and I think this is intuitive. And here you have the proportions of the production of that commodity versus how much waste it's producing is extremely high. On biodiversity, it was much more tricky to really have exact numbers, but definitely we know that agriculture is the main cause for biodiversity loss. And then when we looked at social well-being, we did really focus on the environmental erosion that is creating the social well-being problems. So we have only 3 determinants which were calculated, which are health damages mainly to pesticides and other things, livelihood loss due to erosion, and conflict which are due to water erosion. So when we look at the full cost of wastage in this case, but it could be really of anything, the first thing you have to do is really to have a framework. What is it that you are calculating? What is it that you can really account for? And what is it that is not accounted or is not accountable, because of different methodological or even ethical reasons, like the price of life, for example. So here you have this framework. Just very quickly, we go from the production to processing, marketing, and consumption, and end of life. So we have all these phases of the food chain where you do have food wastage, the impact on natural resources in terms of all the resources, but also how these resources, as they become more scarce, you have also a higher price, of these resources that are becoming, more difficult to be available, or they're polluted, and then the impact on people and society, and all this is translated into economic cost. Now, the approach we've taken for the valuation is the total economic value approach, And I would like to stress that what we could calculate in a rigorous way, and it's an underestimate also, is only the direct use cost, which is what you have in the under the red line, you know. So you have direct use of resources, like the cost of water or the scarcity of water we also included, and the indirect uses, like, you know, what are the services that we have, but all the option values, the value for future generation, recreation, and so forth, was not accounted in this approach because of methodological difficulties. Now, when you look at the economic price of the food which is wasted, it's about $1 trillion US dollar. And this is as big as the GDP of a country like Netherlands. It's huge in terms of economic loss. And here again, you have it divided by commodity. Now, when you look at the impact on atmosphere, we did calculate the greenhouse gas cost in terms of social cost of carbon, deforestation, organic soil, and ammonia emissions. And you see that the total price is 395 billion per year for carbon. In terms of water, we did calculate water security, and this is much more important than water price, because water price, because of subsidies, is very small for a start, and it's also part of the economic cost. But water scarcity is very important, which means if you don't have enough water, like in the North African region, for example, and you're using more water, you are contributing to having less water in the future. So this is a higher cost, and we have an impact factor which has been calculated in that perspective. Then we looked at the nitrogen and phosphorus eutrophication and what it costs to clean up these damages. Pesticides and nitrate in drinking water also, which is a cost that we all pay for, and irrigation cost. When we looked at land, we looked at the erosion, which is caused by water and by water erosion and wind erosion, and also deforestation. In the case of biodiversity, this was the most underestimated cost because of lack of data, because in each of these data sets, we really needed to have global data set for 194 countries of all commodities, so in all basic groups. So it was a very extensive modeling to do that. So we could calculate only the cost of overfishing and of the fish which is lost in the sea, the loss of pollinators, and how agriculture is paying the price with less productivity, and the damage cost which is caused by nitrogen runoff. In social well-being, as I said, and I think you've seen it in the video, we did calculate the risk of conflict from lack of water coming from erosion, livelihood loss of households, the health damage, and the acute health impact of pesticides. So what's most interesting of this is that the impact factor is 1.5. If you are spending actually, in the case of food wastage, 1 trillion is more or less the sum that we are losing. We are losing $1.5 trillion that we have already paid. It's not money to be paid. And here I put it in a more, let's say, easy way to understand, for each dollar of food, because we did it for food wastage, but it applies to the whole food system. For each dollar of food that you have on the market shelf, you have already paid in taxes another dollar in terms of mitigation, for the destruction and the mitigation costs, another dollar for a loss of well-being in terms of health or livelihood or others. So it's 3 times as much almost. And this is already happening, and it's an underestimate. And I think it's very important to stress that it's an underestimate. And this one, I'm not going to go very quickly through it, is what you've seen in the video, these different type of preferences of reducing, reusing, and recycling food waste. And we have done also case studies. I have brought some publications here, and which is this one, which I will leave now for you. If you want to have copies, I can send you, and you can have it also on the website. We have done calculations because we had the question said, okay, you want to reduce food wastage, but for example, for greenhouse gas emissions in terms of climate benefits, but how much are you going to lose, in having more fridges or infrastructure, for example, to save the same food from rotting? So we did all the life cycle analysis of the carbon use. for the mitigation measure and for the benefit we're getting out of it, and we did cost-benefit analysis. And we could see very clearly that it's definitely much better. I mean, it's intuitive, but again, we have the numbers here to prevent waste or even to reuse waste rather than recycle it. And I think this is very important because what's happening, at least in Europe, I don't know what's happening exactly in America, but in Europe, every time that governments want to find a solution to food wastage, that just go for biogas. It's the least environmentally friendly measure before going to landfill. So I think this is important to know. This is only a projection that we have done for COP21, again, on what would happen if we follow the Sustainable Development Goal of reducing food wastage by 50% and how much greenhouse gas benefit we can save. And the conclusion is that really, we cannot work on everything, but it's important to know where the hotspots are, and this is why we have the commodity impact factor, for on natural resources, and try to focus on these. And we have seen already, at least I've seen in my work already, a big shift, from different countries incorporating and working more with the food industry on reducing waste. So with all the imperfections of true cost, and all the underestimate, I think the degree of magnitude of the problem is reflected, and this is enough to really trigger change. We don't really need to go on the exact figures. So that is it, and this is the website where you can find all this information, including we have a database of different practices which are done in different countries, and have the booklet here. We have here already more than 50 case studies, and anybody from you can take, from the internet and add your own best practices, and it helps others, to just go and see what's happening in California. You can filter and have all the good examples like that, and it's really a platform to exchange knowledge on that. Thank you.
Information to digest. Thank you.
Yeah, it was. So while he's getting set up, I'm just going to, sometimes when you're speaking, you just have to get what's on your mind off of your chest. And I have to tell you, I woke up, it was like a gorgeous day this morning, and I never wear skirts when I present because I never know if I'm going to be on a stage. But today I was like, there's 8 breakout groups. So there's no way I'm going to be up on a stage. And so I'm just going to wear skirts. It's nice out. And just have to get that off my mind. So I can talk, I'm going to stand. I know why. All right, so my name is Dana. Thank you all for being here. How many of you feel like you're pretty familiar with this whole topic of waste? Just like in a sense, not that I can see anything, but okay, most of you. And Nadia just gave us a great overview. So I was asked to give kind of an overview of the true cost in the US of food waste, and I'm going to sort of do that and then hopefully get into a few other things as well. This, by the way, is a shot taken by the producers of the movie Just Eat It. Has anyone seen that? Some of you. If you haven't, it's like a very clever, hilarious, really well done movie. So I suggest it, but this is a dumpster full of perfectly good hummus. It was actually 3 weeks before the date on the package. They didn't know why it was thrown out, they just found it, but their best guess was that it was in Canada, and there was some mismarking of the bilingual stuff you have to do there. So there's all sorts of things leading to waste. All right, so we're going to start with a quiz. Just to make sure you're all awake after lunch. So about how many days past the sell-by date can you eat eggs? I'm not going to read the answers, but just think in your head and answer 20 to 35. So 3 to 5 weeks after the sell-by date, even the FDA says so. Okay, but let's say you weren't really quite sure, and so you have these eggs, and you're trying to decide, can you still eat them? And you put them in a bowl of water, and you know it's still good to eat if it sinks. All right, good job. Okay, but let's just say it floated, and you toss it. How many minutes of a shower could you have taken with the water it took to produce that one egg? 11. 11-minute shower. So your whole shower, it's something like 1 egg. Okay, but what if instead of an egg, you threw out a hamburger? How many minutes of a shower could you have taken then? 9. All right. Wow. You guys are all reading my blog or something. Okay, but let's just say that instead of one hamburger, you threw out all of the turkey that gets thrown out over the Thanksgiving holiday, the week of Thanksgiving. How many times could you have driven from here to New York and back? 800,000 in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, now you're awake. So, as Nadia was pointing out, I mean, we invest just so many resources in agriculture. 80% of our water, 70% if you count it a different way, a lot. Half of our land in this country goes to agriculture, about 10% of our energy. And obviously, when we're not eating that food, those resources are not going to good use. We waste about 40% of the food in our food supply, which is after imports and exports. You'll see things by the USDA that say it's about 31%, but those only start at retail, and they're calculated differently. So if you sort of add in the earlier parts of the supply chain, I think it pretty much corroborates that it's somewhere around 40%. And to Nadia's point, who cares? It's a lot. And it costs a lot, right? We spend a lot on that food that goes to waste. There's now some different reports out there, but somewhere between $162 to $218 billion worth of food is going to waste. And there, if you can see, it's a supply chain sort of breakout there of where it's happening. This is from a recent report by something called ReFed, which was kind of a consortium of groups that did it, and Deloitte actually did the analysis. And as you can see, certainly it tends towards the later part of the supply chain. That's not to say we should be ignoring what's going on farms. Serious resource impacts. Now, I kind of, because I use this slide so much, like breeze through it now, but I actually want to stop and just think about it because the numbers are totally staggering. 25% of all the water in this country is going to grow food that never gets eaten. 30% of the cropland, some estimates are more like 18 to 20% of the cropland. 33 million cars worth of greenhouse gases, and the number one product entering our landfills today is food. Not to mention the nutrition that goes along with that. So the USDA estimate is that it's about 141 trillion calories. If you did a really kind of cut and dry analysis of that, it would be enough calories to feed 50 million Americans. Now that doesn't mean they're good calories, and it doesn't mean it's easy to get it to those people, but just to give you a sense of that, just 30% of that would feed 50 million Americans, which is about the number that are food insecure today. Again, kind of where is it happening? Tending towards the consumer-facing businesses and homes, and if you look down there, you get a breakdown. Again, this is from a report called ReFed. If you go to refed.com, refed.com, you can kind of play around with these numbers and slice and dice them in a bunch of ways. It's very interactive. It's cool. I invite you to check it out. But, bottom line, what this is saying is, consumers in our households are wasting a lot of food when you add us all up together. The estimate is that a household of 4 spends about $1,500 a year on food they never eat, and it winds up being about 20% of the food we buy. And I actually believe that $1,500 is quite an underestimate. And when you look at businesses, grocery stores, they are a chunk of it. Actually, when you look at food service together, when you combine kind of fast food and fine dining and hospital cafeterias, food service is actually a much bigger chunk than grocery. So that's kind of your snapshot of the issue. I would like now to turn to just some solutions, and you definitely cannot read this, I'm sure. But this is from that ReFed report that came out, and our goal, we were one of the many partners that were part of the effort. And our goal was to try to look at like, okay, so we all know this is a problem, but where do you start, right? What do you do first? And so we looked at about 50 different potential practices that could be done either by industry or by municipalities, and said how much food would they save if everyone did this? How much food could we save? And how much would it cost or save in dollars to do that? Like, what is the size of the prize here? And with that, try to create a roadmap for how to prioritize what to do, and sort of just do some of the homework so everyone wasn't left trying to do it for themselves. And there's again a few ways to kind of slice and dice this, which is why I invite you to go check it out yourself so that it can speak to you and your needs. But this particular graph was what we called the cost curve, and it was basically what is the cost effectiveness of doing each of these things? How many pounds do you get per dollar invested? And the sort of to the left are the highest return on investment, essentially. So we have standardizing food date labels, so the expiration dates, the use by, sell by, best by. We can go into that later if it interests you. Consumer education campaigns, because that consumer number is such a big part of the pie. Packaging adjustments for food products, like, I'm dying for some pasta sauce maker to make a half-size pasta sauce jar because I never want that much pasta in a week. I want, half of that sauce, but you can freeze it. And anyways, it goes on from there. So anyway, it's a great analysis, and I think it gave us a start at looking at things. Now, there's only 27 of the about 50 we looked at because it's so hard to get data on this stuff, and we actually were not able to really find enough data, given the sort of scope we had that was available to us to really do all of them. But hopefully someday we will continue, we will get more data, and we will look at some more of these practices. Also, what they found was that, one more thing to point out. McKinsey did a cost curve like this. This is how we got the idea for carbon back in 2007. And when you look at that cost curve, it has like a bunch of stuff in the negative and a bunch of stuff in the positive. What was really amazing about this, and we didn't expect it at first, is that everything came out like net positive in terms of the cost. All of these are a winner. The only thing is they're not always a winner to the person spending the money, or the entity spending the money. So for instance, that pasta sauce company, right, they spend money in the R&D and design and making new pasta jars that have half as much pasta. You get to save the money in buying a smaller jar and wasting less pasta sauce as a consumer. So the cost and the benefit don't always line up to the same entity, and that, in my mind, is just a place that we need to acknowledge and then think about, okay, so who should pay, given that, right? And I think it's part of what we were trying to do is inform philanthropic investment and just impact investment. 2 minutes. So what they found was that, nevertheless, a total investment of about $18 billion over 10 years would result in net economic savings of about $100 billion, and then a dramatic set of resource savings along with that. There were a handful of practices that did have, were kind of net positive for the businesses that might invest in them. And the number one there was really investing in tracking your waste and analyzing it, because surprisingly, it's a really hard number for businesses to get their hands on. It's like, how much food are we wasting and why? And at the resolution they need to really make changes to their operations in order to actually save food. But when they did invest the time in doing that, they actually saw direct savings since they themselves were wasting less food. So what is NRDC doing? That's who I work for. We are really kind of, right now, because we're launching next week, focusing on building consumer momentum. So this issue has been tremendous in that it's just like gained so much momentum over the last several years, and yet that's kind of just in our little food community. And so we are really trying to take the next step and reach out to the American public, and we're doing that in the form of a partnership with the Ad Council. which, if you're not familiar, is like the nonprofit arm of the advertising industry that brought you things like Smokey the Bear and Friends Don't Let Friends Drive Junk, and we are launching next week. So I'm going to show you a sneak peek. So everybody put their phones down. No pictures are allowed. We're doing some other stuff too. We're working on date labels, and we are actually looking at some models for municipalities. But I know you want the sneak peek, so here you go. Okay, hopefully you can see that. This is my favorite part. We're going to have billboards, bus stops, ads, posters, and this is all part of the out-of-home series. There will also be a TV spot. There's a whole like guerrilla stencil thing we're hoping to get out there, and a bunch of social. So please keep your eyes peeled. This is the out-of-home series. Hopefully coming to a billboard near you soon. Best if used. Period. And the tagline there is cook it, store it, share it, just don't waste it. But the umbrella campaign is Save the Food. And we're really excited to get it out there and hoping that basically just people from all different walks of life can use the campaign in some way. So we're really going to be out there looking for partners to, put it up in their stores, to tell us how we can use it in restaurants and things like that. Okay, now I have negative 2 minutes, so. I'll just mention that we also, on the consumer side, put a book out last fall called the Waste Free Kitchen Handbook. It's a guide to eating well and wasting, and what is it? It's a guide to eating well and saving money by wasting less food. I only wrote it. But it has a lot of tips on like how you can store food better, recipes for using up your like overripe avocados and your sour milk. It has a recipe for sour milk pancakes. That's my favorite. Yes, you can use that. And other good things. And I'm actually going straight from here to sign books downstairs. Okay, so I just want to kind of close by saying that there is a lot of momentum in just like a few short years of this topic being on the general radar. We went from like nobody having ever talked about it to the Obama administration announcing a goal to reduce food waste by 50% by 2030 in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And I have to say, I think they are taking it seriously so far. They're really trying to stop and think, like, what can they do? But the government cannot, like, save food for us, right? There's some things they can do, but it's very much an all-hands-on-deck problem. And so I just want to sort of cite, but they're very open-minded, and I think there's a lot of open-mindedness. There's a lot of businesses thinking about how they can do this. There's a lot of startups thinking about how they're going to, like, totally rock this world, like imperfect. And so there's really a moment to seize here. So let's just say you were concerned about this whole food waste thing. What could you do? Something. And this is my just turned 1-year-old, and that is my latest innovation that I'm like maybe a little too proud of, which is that I put a plastic mat under her high chair, and I clean it off before I feed her, and then when she's like, nah, I just pick the food up and I put it back on her plate because it's clean, it's on the mat, and it's all good. So there's something everyone can do.
From one Dana to the other. This is Dana Frasz.
Hey everyone. Building on the momentum of the movement, one thing I remember about being in Fort Mason about 4.5 years ago, there was a sustainable food conference. There wasn't one panel or one person talking about food waste. And so I'm really happy that we have our own panel this time. For me, this journey started in college. I saw so much waste on campus. I started a food recovery group, and that flourished and then eventually fell apart. And that's when I really started to question the all-volunteer charity model to address food recovery. Is it the most sustainable? Is it the most effective? Is it, how might we design a model that is more efficient and more sustainable going forward? Today I want to share with you the main challenges that we see in the food recovery sector with a spotlight on our recent research we did with Santa Clara County, what's happening now that we see in the region, and key principles that we believe are really important for the sector as we move forward. We already heard about the costs of wasted food and also the cost of hunger, where hunger is costing the nation about $168 billion a year, and that's an old number, so my guess is it's a little higher now. In Silicon Valley, it's one of the wealthiest places in the United States, but even in this wealthy region, 1 in 4 people and 1 in 3 children don't have adequate access to food. This obviously doesn't make sense financially, it doesn't make sense environmentally, and I believe we have an ethical obligation and an opportunity to find solutions to this completely solvable problem. Many efforts exist in Santa Clara County and across the country that are attempting to connect surplus food to people, and yet both food and people are still falling through the cracks. Santa Clara hired Food Shift to do a research project about a year ago to figure out what's happening. Why is so much food going to waste when there's so many good organizations in the community working and so many people that need that food? We spoke with dozens of businesses, we spoke with food assistance organizations, food recovery groups, to really figure out what are the gaps in the system and what are the opportunities, where can we intervene and be effective. What we found, we know that food recovery is actually really complex. It's more complex than most people realize. And so we really feel like we need to understand the challenges within the food recovery space if we're going to be effective at developing solutions. So the main challenges that came up were around infrastructure and capacity, lack of sector innovation and collaboration, inefficient nutrition, inefficient distribution as well, and business challenges, lack of education or incentives within the business community. The main challenge that came up again and again as we spoke with folks is limited infrastructure and capacity. And for food recovery, this is refrigeration, storage space, kitchen facilities, and staff. And this is what's necessary to properly recover, redistribute, and in many cases process food that needs to be preserved. One food recovery organization said to us, if we were to make millions of pounds of food available today, it would completely swamp the system. Amazing work is being done all across the region. Food Runners is a great example of that. I'm putting to work, I believe, over 300 volunteers here. These leaders, these workers really need to be congratulated for their incredible work and dedication. And in a city like San Francisco, we still have 1 in 4 people who are food insecure, so there's still a lot of work to be done. Food recovery groups often know what their communities need and what can be done to connect food to that need, but again, are really under-resourced and don't necessarily have the infrastructure and the staff to make it happen. That would allow them to scale to meet demand. Based on that limited staff, there's really a lot of the food rescue organizations and food assistance groups are really limited in their scope and capacity to think beyond meeting the immediate needs of feeding people. And that's where we lose out on allowing these bright and brilliant minds who really know the sector very well to contribute to innovation and thinking through how we can create more sustainable systemic change. This is what we're doing at Food Shift, and I'm really excited to share with you in a moment about what's happening in Santa Clara County. They're a great example of a county that is putting public dollars towards food recovery innovation. In terms of distribution, many organizations, food assistance groups, receive too much, while some receive too little, and then other agencies receive types of foods that really aren't, that don't make sense for the populations they serve, and so that leads to more wastage. Additionally, there's a lot of people being left out of current food distribution models, like seniors, children, or really anybody who has transportation or logistical challenges of getting to those food distribution sites. There's really an opportunity to work directly with communities and figure out how we might better meet the needs of those communities in terms of our food distribution, and how do we do it with dignity so people aren't standing in lines at soup kitchens and food banks. Along those same lines, a lot of the food assistance agencies reported receiving a lot of highly processed food that is unhealthy for their community. One interviewee said, "We need less bread and more healthy food, not just more food. We often get junky food with empty calories. It's not just about volume, but about quality." when we fail to provide nutritious food to communities who are already vulnerable populations, we are simply adding fuel to the fire of diet-related diseases like obesity and heart disease. Or as my mentor, a huge inspiration to me, Robert Egger says, we poison people in the name of feeding people, and then we make them servants of a system. Businesses largely want to do the right thing, but they have a lot of barriers or perceived barriers in their way. One of those is the myth of liability. Who here has heard of the Good Samaritan Food Act? Awesome, that's great. All potential food donors should know about this act. It is a powerful federal protection, but as we found, most businesses don't know about it. And if you happen to go into a grocery store or a restaurant and ask what they do with their leftover food, most of the time you'll hear, we can't donate because we'll be held liable, something along those lines. So there's a huge opportunity there. Among willing donors, we often also hear that they perhaps did donate in the past, but might not now, because of unreliability or inconsistency of food recovery groups. Again, this relates back to limited staff and capacity within those groups. There's also a perceived cost associated with donating food. That packaging it up is going to take staff time, and businesses might not realize that there are tax deductions available for food donation, and they could potentially also reduce their waste disposal costs. And we discovered this recently, just last year, with Andronico's community markets in Berkeley. At one store, we found that by donating food, they could save $27,000 a year. So this is just a snapshot of what we learned in Santa Clara County. There's a whole report online at foodchip.net/report if you're interested in downloading the full report. So what's next? Santa Clara County is pretty impressive with where they're at right now. We did that report about a year ago, and just last month the county had a food rescue forum, and the forum brought together 100 stakeholders from across the region to talk about solutions, to talk about challenges, and to come up with an action plan. Something that was really important prior to that conference, they hired a food rescue coordinator. They're actually paying to have a team that is managing the coordination of a working group specifically focused on food recovery, following up on that action plan, tracking different metrics that need to be tracked. Really impressive. I don't know of any other place across the country that's actually put their money where their values are in this regard and hired people within the county to make that happen. So very exciting to watch them in the year ahead. Similarly, Alameda County just launched a food recovery working group. We're doing some really exciting pilots in the year ahead and looking for more pilot ideas. One of the pilots is around bringing food to seniors who currently don't have access to food assistance services in the region, and another is exploring a food recovery technology for the region. The challenge there is figuring out which technology to choose because there are dozens of them. Oh, and the Alameda Kitchen. So this is what I'm really excited about right now. We're launching a kitchen in Alameda to address one of the other challenges, which is the need for processing of some of the food to lengthen its shelf life. So this means creating products that can either be frozen or creating soups, things that are preserved. In this kitchen, this is a kitchen we're launching largely based off the DC Central Kitchen model, which has been really successful there. We'll be transforming fresh fruits and vegetables that might otherwise be wasted, things like what the imperfect folks have down here. They're actually one of our donors. And we'll be in the process providing job training for people who are formerly homeless. How are we able to do this? Well, we're selling the products to local businesses, we're distributing to low-income populations, and in doing that, we're able to generate revenue so that we're financially sustainable. Next, I want to mention the key principles that we follow in our work and that we'd recommend that other groups doing this work in the food recovery space also follow. One is a commitment to innovation. We know that we can't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. We need to increase the capacity and infrastructure of food recovery groups first before encouraging more donations. This is so we avoid completely swamping the system. We believe in social enterprise, that in order for these groups and organizations and initiatives to be effective and scalable, they need to also be financially sustainable. We need to develop and invest in community-driven solutions and have these solutions be really led by the people in the communities who are most affected by our broken food system. So that means when we have these conversations, when we're developing new solutions around food access and food distribution, community needs to be at the table. Collaboration is key. No one group can do this alone. Everyone has a role to play. Nutrition is essential. We should be aiming for the highest quality and best food first. We know that food alone won't solve hunger. So in our work, we're not just addressing those immediate needs, but we're also looking at what kind of systemic solutions can we put in place that address hunger and poverty. And food is so much more than just fuel for the body. Food is powerful. Food has this potential to educate, to teach, to inspire, to bring people together in new and exciting ways. And so as we envision what we'd like this new food recovery, food distribution model to look like, we really want to leverage and maximize the power of food to do more than just provide calories to people and communities. When we look at the food system, we also look at the recycling system, which was also started by a lot of kind of scrappy nonprofit organizations back in the 1970s. That sector really emerged as a really critical part of the way our society works in the 90s, and this was due to a lot of public policy initiatives at the state and local level. So we believe if food recovery is going to have the impact it absolutely has to have, we can't keep heading in that direction as we've seen up on these slides, it needs to be brought out of the shadows, legitimized through public education, and elevated through public policy. With government support, we think we can actually have a food recovery service sector as an extension of our current waste management system and as a way to create jobs in the green economy. We know ultimately this is a great opportunity, and as we sit in this room, there's a lot of powerful people, a lot of great minds in a city that is known for its innovation and cutting-edge ideas. So as we sit here today, I hope we can not be constrained by what currently exists, but also imagine what's possible.
So, how was your lunch today?
Good.
Are you wondering what happened to the leftover food?
Yes.
A volunteer from Food Runners came at 1:30 and picked up all the leftover food and took it to a shelter that feeds the hungry. So I'm a lightweight on the panel because I don't have slides and figures, but I'm going after three fantastic speakers who did a really persuasive job. Thank you so much. Food Runners was, I'm a cooking teacher by career, and I started a full-time cooking school. I started working hard in my 30s to create a professional cooking school. And in my 40s, I was looking around for a way to give back. And I started with what's called the mayor's office. I ended up the San Francisco Food Bank at that time. You know that there's a whole system of food banks across the country that are warehouses of non-perishable food. And at the time, the San Francisco Food Bank didn't have clean water that they could wash their hands in. And so they could not, and they still, the food bank in San Francisco, now it's in a fancy new building, and it's gigantic, and they've got trucks delivering food around and pantries serving people in the neighborhoods, but they still only take bread and produce that's wrapped. And so if a fishmonger in San Francisco has 40 pounds of fresh fish on Friday afternoon, and they're going home for the weekend, they can call Food Runners and we will pick up that fish and take it to a shelter where it gets cooked that night. So Food Runners is a system that I started with some women almost 30 years ago, and for an annual budget of $350,000 a year, we figure we are delivering 16 tons of food a week that would otherwise be thrown away. We pick up perishable natural and prepared foods from any business in San Francisco. So it could be a law firm in a high-rise down in the financial district. It could be a Starbucks with a bag of muffins. One of the best donors, and this is not for publication, is a company called Trader Joe's. And Trader Joe's does not want the publicity. But we pick up at every Trader Joe's in San Francisco every day, every Whole Foods in San Francisco every day. Trader Joe's, the reason I like them so much is they give us dated milk, they give us packaged dated meat, they give us expired foods, and we take it and flowers. They even give us fresh flowers. Trader Joe's is amazing. But so any business in San Francisco, in the old days, we started with a phone in my house with a little, I was on a phone, what they call a phone warrior, bossing people around on the phone. Now we have an app, and we've joined the new generation where people can let us know through the internet. But we have, listen to this. This week, we have 500 pickups, and some of them are done by people in their own vehicles. We have food runners, volunteers that go by on foot. We have one truck driver with one truck for donations that are larger than will fit in a car. And we have two people a week on cargo bikes driving around in the South Market because with picking up trays of leftover food from the tech companies. And how does it work? They, according to the website, according to a physical person on the phones dispatching, what we will do is we take the Trader Joe's food, which is uncooked. We take to either a small or a large soup kitchen where they cook the food. So an example of a small, there's two nuns, I think you've read about them in the paper. They call themselves Fraternité Notre Dame. They cook at 54 Turk, lunch 4 days a week for 450 people. Now the people don't have to be free of alcohol or drugs, they just come for lunch. 450 people a day for lunch. So we take to the nuns, uncooked produce. We take to Glide and St. Anthony, the big soup kitchens, trucks of produce. If we have, we get a lot of soup sandwiches and salads in containers from places like Whole Foods. We take those to drop-in centers, like the Larkin Street Youth Center, the runaway kids. And so they just pick up sandwiches, and then we often get, as I said before, we have these trays and trays. So what we have now, I heard a really interesting story today I did a little show on labeling for Michael Finney on Channel 7, and listen to this. So the reason Uber and Twitter and Google and all these companies provide really, really good food for their employees, because they don't want them to go out to lunch. And because if they go out to lunch, they're going to take another job. And they're going to go meet somebody for lunch and get a job offer. And so they want, and sometimes they go out for lunch and never come back. So this one startup, listen to this, they have a caterer bring in the food, and after a few weeks they can find a new caterer because they want to keep offering a variety of food to the kids working in the tech companies. So, and then you've got the problem of the gluten-free and the lacto-intolerant and those kind of people. So when you go to Twitter, when you work at Twitter, you have trays of fantastic food to choose from. And we get the leftover trays. Sometimes we get 35 trays a day in a foil pan of what people don't want to eat. Sometimes it's from the chef at Twitter. Sometimes who's an in-house chef, and sometimes it's from the Zero Catering that brought it in. Does that, you see what we're doing? We estimate we're getting 2 tons a week from the tech companies. Now that kind of food that's already cooked, we take to group homes. There are 350 recipients of our food in San Francisco. So that if it's warm, if it's heatable, we take it to where somebody's putting it in the oven and serving it to the residents. So that's, and then there are a lot of new startups starting in the San, and you've heard of Munchery and Sprague and all those delivery services. Well, there's a new one called Eat Club, and all of these guys, all of the Eat and Uber Eats, there are all these people delivering meals, whole meals in packages. And what they're using for deciding how much, they're using something called an algorithm to figure out how much food to make and guessing on whether it's going to be ordered or not. And if it isn't ordered, we get the leftover food. So sometimes we get as many as 150 boxes of a totally prepared meal that's either hot or cold from Eat Club, one of these startups that delivers hot meals to cater luncheon places. So those we take to the seniors in their apartment buildings and the low-income places. So that we talked about seniors not wanting to go and line up, and so we take the already prepared meals to people that are, homebound for the most part and can't cook. So. Do you see how the Food Runners works? We divide it up. We pick up leftover edible food and take it where it can best be used. But so far as I can see, that people who have talked earlier today with all their statistics about figuring out a better solution, we've got to. We can't keep growing more fruits and vegetables than we need. We can't keep discarding what isn't perfect for the consumer. I think there's people often say, well, does Food Runners pick up from restaurants? And the answer is not that much food. Most restaurants, we started with greens. You're going to eat at Greens, some of you are going to eat at Greens tonight. Greens has given us in the past a bucket of black beans when 2 people cooked the beans by mistake, or leftover polenta or something, or rice. But generally, most restaurants in San Francisco cook to order. And so they don't cook more fish or they don't order more fish. Do you see what I'm saying? So restaurants are not a great supplier, even though there's a lot of waste at restaurants, but that's mostly lettuce leaves and coffee grounds, I think. But the idea of not serving gigantic portions. I was in Scottsdale, Arizona, where a club sandwich is enough to feed 4 people. So the idea of restaurants not serving so much more than people need, the idea of home people not being terrified of the milk and pouring it out, all of that can work so that we don't rely on people like Food Runners to pick up and take it to the charities. The thing that I want to say before I close is that the other remarkable thing about having people like Nadia and Dana on the panel is that we've got people working really hard to help prevent food waste or help do something about it. And I'm really proud that Food Runners is starting all over the country. There have always been volunteer organizations picking up at the local stores and taking it to run by churches and synagogues and places like that. There have always been individuals doing their best, but there's now Food Runners, and there's a Second Harvest. There's all sorts of perishable programs starting around the country, which in Connecticut and Pennsylvania and Vancouver. So we're really glad to see that this awareness, and every one of you can help to make it happen by saying, the next time you go to a fancy cocktail party by a fancy caterer, what are you doing with your leftover food? Thank you. Remember,
That was a great That was a great set of gossip you just gave us about the tech industry. I'm gonna have to put that one in my back pocket. Naming names and everything. So I want to give the audience a chance to ask some questions. We do not have a lot of time. I have one question I wanted to throw out there, though, quickly. And I think you all have gotten at little pieces of this, but I just wanted to ask your take on sort of what is the balance between harvesting this low-hanging fruit, this waste that does exist, and institutionalizing a system where we rely on that waste.
I have no idea what the question was.
So, I guess
How do you institutionalize a system?
so what I'm saying is that, just to elaborate a little more, sorry if that was too quick. I hear from folks once a week who are doing something like what Dana's doing or something like what you're doing, Mary, and I think it's fantastic in many ways. But I wonder at whether or not that's the sustainable solution moving forward on the really big picture level. Does that make sense? Like, if we need to produce enough food so that we feed the hungry this way, versus to produce enough food to feed everybody in the first place, and to set up our social structures so we feed everybody in the first place, does that?
I can take a
Yeah.
step and maybe that'll answer it. Is this on? I think another way to phrase that is food recovery a solution for food waste, in a way, right? And I would like to quote Mary Risley. The last time I heard her talk which was at the Zero Food Waste Forum, and I was kind of hoping we'd say this again because it was so awesome. And she was like, "There's so much effing food out there, don't waste." Something like that, right? So, there's sort of this question, and is there a tension or is there not? Of if we were so good at if we could be so efficient that there really wasn't all of that surplus food for food runners, food shift to collect and bring to people, like, is that bad? And do we want to like build out this big system of food recovery with all of this infrastructure as our solution to how much extra food we're putting, to the fact that Twitter has to have like 17 extra trays every time they have a function? I mean, is that really the best way to do it? And
Especially considering the hierarchy that we looked at, which showed us that it's twice as valuable to prevent it in the first place on all these other levels.
And I can tell you, like, I focus mostly on the prevention side, and I'm very cognizant that everyone talks about it, and very, very, very few people spend any time thinking about it or really doing that first reduce part, because it's hard. That is like redoing your business model. It's like potentially disappointing your customers or your guests at your party, right? To like, you know, are you gonna have enough food? We have this like innate, like, we're gonna have enough food. You're gonna have enough food. But anyways, I think it is a question in terms of like investing. Where are we gonna invest in this problem? And I mean, my personal opinion is that if I could design the food system from scratch today, I would love to see a system that was so efficient that did not have enough surplus to be worth anyone's time to go around and pick it up and bring it to people who need it, and that we design in from the start a way to feed people who need more food and get them, you know, fresh, good food, the type of food we want them eating, you know, kind of right from the start. And yet that is like a long far cry from where we are today, and it's a huge service that, you know, places like food runners are doing. So I don't know what the answer is. I think we need to make sure we are investing in prevention. And when I've had conversations with people in the food recovery sector about like, if I'm really good at what I'm trying to do, am I going to put you out of business? And is that going to be bad? And generally, I've been really impressed with the response, which is, we're not worried because there's so much, but also if that did happen, we have found that there's a lot of generosity out there. And, you know, I've heard examples of like canning companies that spend an extra day canning specifically to get that food, you know, directly into the sort of donation channel. And I do think, you know, if we were to be very successful in preventing it, we would not leave everyone astray. You know, we'd probably rely on financial donations to buy food, and that is actually what the food banks do already to a certain extent. I don't know.
I think the solution is to give everybody an acre of land and we all go back to being a farmer. And feed chickens, feed the chicken scraps and pig scraps and industrial farming is, and then this whole system that's set up through grocery. We are so far away from growing our own food, but the answer is you're right. We've got to stop. We've got to stop it at every level.
And I
try
think
to
you-
stop it at every level.
Sorry, I think you nailed it. I would agree with everything you guys have said, and not to get too political or anything, but these issues around hunger and food insecurity are so much deeper than just about food. This is about jobs, this is about poor education, this is about affordable housing, this is about poor transportation in communities. So if we really want to get to the root cause of some of these core issues that we're focused on around hunger, we have to address some of those much bigger issues of inequality.
Yeah, and can I just add one more thing before Nadia goes, which is, as someone who sits outside of the food recovery sector but interacts with it quite a bit, I will say that it most certainly is being used as a waste management strategy by a lot of businesses. And it's much cheaper than paying, and in fact, a volunteer comes and all of your extra stuff that you produced accidentally, because you misforecasted, just magically disappears. Oh, and you get an enhanced tax deduction for that. Even if it's 38 truckloads of Coca-Cola that actually no food bank really wants to be, giving out from a nutrition perspective. And so I feel like there is kind of this undiscussed aspect of food recovery, which, and it goes to what Dana was saying about why is this not a paid service? Why do you pay to get your compost picked up, to get your garbage picked up? And yet a much more complicated execution is getting food safely to people who need it, and all of a sudden you get paid to do that instead of paying for it. And it's sort of this fundamental irony in the whole system right now that I think if resolved, we would hopefully see that, that paired with food banks feeling empowered to say no to products that are not healthy enough for the constituencies as they want to be serving. I think we would hopefully see, those 38 truckloads of Coca-Cola, not being produced in the first place eventually. They might, it's sort of enabling extra forecasting.
Did you want to answer the question?
Yeah, because I think I have this one slide which I didn't really explain the detail of it, but when we were looking before the SDGs were signed on how much food waste we could reduce on a global basis, of course we don't do it only for one country, it was a big debate, and based on expert judgment it was like 25% only, and then the SDGs went to 50%, which is already a kind of an ambitious target, which will not be reached by 2030, but we're trying to get there. What I'm trying to say is that when you talk about how much food waste you're going to have in the future or not have, we're not going to have a zero waste thing. There are areas of low-hanging fruits that we can act upon and other not. When we looked at the scenario, for example, for the 50%, what does it mean in terms of greenhouse gas emissions? We have to divide, first of all, between post-harvest losses and consumer waste, in terms of food. We assume that in a country in the USA you have already high technology, so in terms of post-harvest losses we have calculated only 5% of reduced food waste at that, and it's mostly cleaning, have all these efforts of what's left in the field, for people to go and collect it, and all the ugly product produced, I would say, is a low-hanging fruit that we can work on, and then trying to change legislation for distribution, to be more efficient, and already in 5 years' time we have had a big improvement worldwide with big retailers which have gone to 5% or even less, of the food waste at the retail level in supermarkets. It's really improving very, very quickly. The sell-by date have changed, the liability also have changed, the laws on that. Maybe what's more where you have more room for trying to have better efficiency is at the consumer level, definitely, in terms of smaller sizings in restaurants, smaller fridges. I mean, big fridges have, proven to be really the best recipe for having for more food waste and so forth, and other things.
So we should probably try to answer a few audience questions. Does anyone have a question? This guy in the front asked the first.
Should I stand up?
Sure.
Hi, thank you guys for being here. It's really wonderful. I'll just project. So, going on like a global scale, I'm just curious. I was about a month ago. I was at UC Berkeley for kind of this mini conference on. It was called Nourishing the 9 Billion, and the question kind of posed for the conference was, how do we feed 9 billion people sustainably, and how do we grow enough food to feed all those people? And food waste was almost not mentioned at all, and when it was brought up, kind of passed over as an afterthought. I'm just curious, when we're wasting 40 or 50% of our food globally, why is food waste not like the centerpiece of the discussion of how do we feed everyone? And also, when, I think one of the things they were talking about was there's an increased demand for meat worldwide as well, which, as we know, requires something like 1,000 times more resources, and therefore the amount of food and land and water that you're using to grow that food. So why is the question not, why, I just supposed to see, like, why aren't people at the national and global scale not talking about food waste as the way to solve hunger worldwide, and also as talking about consumer preferences, treating meat as a luxury and raising it sustainably to begin with. So, thanks.
Man. I went to a conference like 6 or 7 years ago and had that same thought. And I thought we were further than that. So I'm actually really disappointed to hear that happened. And I would say, I don't know, I would have said they actually are starting to. You certainly see the FAO, the UN, like taking a strong stance on this. And the research that they've done and the numbers that they put out are incredibly powerful in trying to make the argument for that. I think the estimate is that if we, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we could reduce food waste by 50%, we could offset the need for about a quarter, like 22% I think it is, of the future food needs, like kind of the extra future. So, I think it is part of some discussions, and it's all of your job to make sure it's part of all the discussions that you're part of.
Well, I should say that with my team, we've been working on that particular question for the past 5 years, and it's in the process of being published. Now it's with Nature. I hope it will come out. I'm not sure. We have been rejected already by Science, so it's very difficult to get through these publications. But that when we look at feeding the world and so forth, we have to factor for different things. There's different assumptions on impact of climate change and reduced productivity, and there are different scenarios, as you know. But I would say that the one factor really that is going to make a big difference is the feed issue, animal feed issue, because most of the feed is going to animal, and the conversion of protein is extremely low. So more grass-fed animals in terms of ruminants and monogastrics, for biomass circulation, with better also sources for biomass and excess residue, would be able to produce the requirements, according to business as usual, which is 3,085 kilocalories per person, which include food waste, because we don't eat more than 3,000, of course. We eat about 2,000, but this include the current food waste. And then we have done hundreds of different scenarios to see what would be the optimal scenario in terms of reducing waste and reducing feed, because of course nobody's going to turn 100% into changing feed or food waste, and also consumption, because consumption at a global level, I'm anticipating the results here, the consumption of animal-based protein should be reduced at a global level, I underline, by 3 to 4 times, which would have also positive benefits for health, of course, but this is more of an area for debate, I would say, at the international level. So you do have all these scenarios, and it depends on every condition and each country's endowment. You're going to have different levels of reduction of food production versus food wastage, or feed and consumption. So we've done that. I assume that when the article will come out, it will make some noise.
I would just say, in a scenario like that, with a conference like that, you might also consider the profit motive and, who's sponsoring the conference. Because there isn't, I mean, there clearly is some profit in reducing food waste, right? But it's not quite the same as some of the other solutions to.
It was a meat company. The sponsor was a meat company.
So another question.
That was DuPont.
So actually, speaking of profit, so there's talk about reforming the dates, the date labels, and I guess I'm wondering, well, two questions really. What kind of impact do we think that will have on food waste at the consumer level? Like what % of household food waste is around best by dates? And the other piece of it is, how does industry fit into this? I mean, it seems like potentially supermarkets would be losing business and suppliers, manufacturers would be losing business. So what's happening at that level? Do you guys have any idea about that?
So when,
Should we just explain a little bit about what's happening with the date label legislation, which we haven't really
I
done?
can do that, but you have a.
so the answer is currently, when you see a date on the milk carton, it just says, March 15th, 2016. That's put on by the manufacturer. And David Chu has proposed legislation where there's a best sell by and use by dates. But I think
We should say this is in California
it's
specifically.
only in California.
There's a
But
bill proposed in California.
What I was thinking about when we were answering the young man's question is that, a big problem, I think, in our super rich, educated society is nobody knows how to cook. I was in Italy recently, and a good cook in Italy, knows how to use leftover rice and make risotto balls, or leftover pasta and make a frittata. And people reuse food in the kitchen. Here, you buy the food, you serve it to your kids, and your family doesn't like leftovers, so you throw it away. And then there's also this, I think, a culture in the people that I see of terrified of feeding bacteria and germs to children, and they're gonna get poisoned if you don't throw the milk away by the time they throw yogurt away. Yogurt is bacteria. Cheese is made from mold. So, but the specifics of the legal thing, somebody else could get. Dana would be good at that.
Yes, so let's see. The question was.
Well, I have two questions. One was, how much of an impact would reforming the
Date labels
make? And, and how do manufacturers and supermarkets feel about this?
So impact, so we have terrible data in the US. Nobody has really done a very good study to look at 1,000 households and see how much they're throwing out specifically because they misunderstand the dates and think the food's gonna kill them when it's not. But in the UK they have, and they have found that about 20% of household waste in the UK is thrown out due to confusion over the dates on food. And what I can tell you about the US is there are a number of different surveys, and they show that anywhere from 56% to up to about 91% of consumers are reporting either misinterpreting the dates or throwing food out prematurely, at least occasionally, on dates that we know are not meant to indicate they need to be throwing food out. So it's a lot. The slide I showed where it was the number one solution, we actually estimated that if we were to reform them, and I can go into the details of that, but essentially if we were to standardize the way that they're done, because one of the problems right now is that they are just manufacturer suggestions. There is no actual definition, and I can't go out there and tell you every single time you see the word used by, the product is okay to eat afterwards, because there's this very small subset of products where there actually is potentially a little bit of an elevated risk over time as it passes that date. So what the bill that David Chu introduced did was it essentially it basically created a standard system where there are only 2 dates. You can only use 2 words. You can't do enjoy by, delicious if used by, blah, blah, blah. It would just have 2 standard dates. One would be about quality, and those would be products. It essentially would be saying, look, we stand by our brand until this date, but after this date, it's still safe we're not saying it's unsafe after that. And the other would be for this very
And that is
small,
Best Buy.
and that is
Really
best if used by.
Best if used by, yeah.
That's what's in the bill right now. And then the other would say expires on, and when you see that, you would know, okay, actually, I really need to use this before that date or freeze it or something. Now, those would probably be conservative and, whatever, but at least that would allow us to go out and like educate people. And the estimate that we used for that analysis was that only about 5 to 10% of people would change their actual behavior from that. And it still ranked the highest because it costs nothing to do this, right? I mean, all we're talking about is like standardizing the words that are used on the package, and it's really low-hanging fruit. So, is it gonna stop food waste? No, but it's like the obvious thing to do first. And what it does, beyond that, I mean, I've been working on that topic for about 3 years now, and the first thing that happens is people go, oh, I can't, that date doesn't mean that. Like the first thing that happens, they go, oh my God, I cannot wait to tell my wife because I've been fighting with her for 15 years and telling her I could eat the yogurt and I didn't throw it out. The second thing that happens is, well, how am I supposed to know if I can still eat it? Because they have no kitchen knowledge, right? And there's no easy answer to that question because it's food, it's a living thing, it depends on how you handled it, it depends on whatever, but the answer is if you're really worried about getting sick from your food, it's not a matter of it being old, because actually the bacteria that work and enzymes that decay food are different from the bacteria that make you sick from food. So what you should really do if you're worried about getting sick is handle your food safely and learn about that.
And learn to cook.
And which is actually, I mean, it was working on this date thing that got me to write the Waste Free Kitchen Handbook, because it was like, oh my gosh, people don't know how to cook. And they don't know that you can use a wrinkled tomato. Like they actually think you are supposed to throw that out, right? So in the book, there's like this whole lookup section where you can look up all of these products and learn, like, if it has brown dots, can you still eat it? Can you use the peel? Can you use the stem? Like, what do you do with it when it's kind of old? And can you freeze it? And is there a special way to freeze it? Things like that. There are basic kitchen knowledge that were missing, and it kind of all like was because of this date label thing and the fear. That was a really long answer.
Oh, and I'll just add that I have also heard, I was recently interviewing someone at Walmart because I know they have a huge effort going on there, and that they're within the private sector, and also on the federal level, I know there's some people working towards some really similar legislation.
So the
than
California state bill for the Californians just did not quite make it through the health committee this past week, and so it's getting voted on again on Tuesday. So if you are in San Jose or in LA, in the districts of Burke or Campos, those are the two folks that we were really disappointed didn't vote for the state bill. Keep your eyes peeled for a federal bill in both the House and Senate in the next couple months. And Walmart has been a real leader on this topic. They have standardized the way that they're doing dates in their private label brands. And they are really advocating for the industry standard, and they're taking a strong stance on that. And just one last thing, just in terms of like, is this good business? We talked about all of these numbers of how much it costs, how much we're spending on food that we don't eat. Well, guess what? We're spending that, we're giving that money to somebody, right? Like, and so the flip side is, that's how much somebody out there is making on food that's going to waste. And I think, it's not something to dodge. When I've been to the UK and Europe and talked to companies about this, they go like, whether we like it or not, our customers blame us for them wasting food. And so it's actually become part of our brand proposition and our loyalty, kind of brand loyalty that we're after to help our customers waste less food. And when they look at their supply chain and food getting wasted in their supply chain, that's cost that's getting wrapped into, right? Like whatever it costs you to produce 100%, if you're throwing 20% that way, and you can only sell 80%, well, you're gonna wrap your cost into that 80%. So it's actually like that cost is getting passed along of the waste. So there are some, I think, legitimate business reasons. And in the UK, when they looked at the money that consumers have saved, which they have, by the way, they've reduced household food waste by 20% over 5 years in the UK. And when they looked at the money that consumers saved there, they found that about half of it got reinvested at the grocery store in buying more premium brands. So you talk about like less and better meat, right? Like maybe we don't have to stop eating meat. Maybe we can just stop wasting some and use that money we save to buy better produced meat.
All right, I think we actually probably have to wrap up. So folks can.
There's one more question.
I have one more question. I'm a retailer, so I get all of this angle. My struggle is continuously educating the consumer on how to operate the kitchen. What would it take to make a prerequisite of bringing home ec back to high school graduation?
I think that's great. I think it sounds like a hypothetical question, because I think we're all for that.
We write policy to make it a prerequisite
Yeah,
home ec
absolutely.
education in high school,
All right.
all
well,
across the country.
on that wonderful comment, thanks to all the panelists for taking the time. It was great.